Hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Caitlin. I am the children's librarian with Los Angeles Public Library at the Eagle Rock branch. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And hi, everyone. Hi, my name's Lauren. I'm the children's librarian with Los Angeles Public Library at the Studio City branch. And we are so happy and excited to offer this program as part of Los Angeles Public Library's Focus on Parenting series. We hope this dialogue helps you, families in their daily life, gain tools and knowledge that they can use for fun reading and literacy all day, all week, all year long.
Absolutely, yes. And I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Maria Russo, who was the children's books editor of the New York Times Book Review and is now the editorial director of Mine Edition US. It's a children's picture book publisher. Thank you so much, Maria, for being with us today. I wanted to open up the floor to you first. I mean, where's a good place to start on the topic of turning kids into readers?
Well, it's such an interesting topic for parents, right? And you know, it just feels like it's more important than ever that we help our children become readers. And it's also harder than ever. You know, we've traveled around the country since this book has come out, and we just get the same questions over and over from parents who really feel a lot of pressure, and the pressure is coming from two directions, right? So on the one hand, we're all worried because of technology and screens and all the other things that are competing for our children's attention, right? But then there's another side of the pressure, and it's actually coming from school, weirdly. The idea that, you know, there's all of this research showing that children who are readers do better in school and do better in life. And so parents have taken it upon themselves to feel like, oh my God, I better make sure my kid's a good reader, or they're going to fall behind, or they're going to not have, you know, the path to success that they need. And so it's too much to expect of any parent to just sort of single-handedly create a reader. So we really hope, you know, with this book, we were really trying to give support and encouragement and also tips, because there are things you can do to help your child learn to love reading, you know. And I would say really the first thing you can do is just keep in mind our, you know, the mantra we kind of have developed as we've talked about the book, which is school is where children learn how to read. Home is where children learn to love reading. Mm-hmm. And so that's your job as a parent. You know, you are not a teacher. You are not a reading specialist. But you can be someone who yourself loves reading and shares that with your children, and who helps open the world of books to your children in a non-pressured way, you know, that's a genuine, loving, entertaining way. Because, you know, when you come right down to it, why do we read? Right? We read because it's fun. We read because it feels good to us, you know, individually. You know, it's part of your inner life and your most personal sense of yourself. You know, if you think about it, you know, becoming a reader is about really getting in touch with yourself and what you like and your inner voices. And so, you know, we want to give that to our children. You know, we don't want to use it always, you know, we don't want to bring the school always. You know, now we're all schooling at home, right? So it's almost double the pressure, but it's just so important to create an atmosphere in your family, in your family culture, where books are just another entertainment option, you know, and that's what you're sharing with your children. And that's the environment you're creating where they can choose to read on their own. Because, you know, all the research shows it's only when children choose an activity that they're fully engaged in and developing what we call executive function. You know, they need to be choosing it. It can't be something they're doing just for the grade or just because, you know, they have homework. we have to be able to help our children choose to read because it's fun, because they're curious and they're addicted to a series or to the Raina Telgemeier graphic novels. They read one, they have to read them all. That's what you want to create in your children. And I'm here to tell you, you can do it.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Well, Lauren and I have both read the book. We have prepared a few questions for you. And also participants, you are more than welcome to ask questions, enter them into the chat box, and we'll try to get to all of them. I'd love to start off with mine, which is actually I'm going to quote you here, Maria. You say that your toddler connects books with the familiar, beloved sound of your voice and the physical closeness that reading brings together. And I was wondering if you could talk more about the building of positive associations with books that happens when toddlers are read aloud to.
It's so important. So there's two parts of it. The one thing is that you're building a positive association with books, right? Books are a fun part of our day. Books are the moment that we sit down for a story, we snuggle together. Oh, look at these cute pictures. Look at, when they learn how to turn the page on their own, that's a real fun achievement. Oh, what's going to be on the next page? So you're offering them this experience that is actually very enjoyable for a toddler, especially if you can get board books and interactive books that have that tactile element. You're helping them connect. The ways that we learn to read really start in toddlerhood with connecting these kinetic elements, with the words that we're hearing, being read to us and even seeing on the page. So it's a bonanza for their development, their brain development, to have stories read to them. The structure of the sentences, the rhyming, the repetition, all of that is really good for how the brain learns and develops the pre-learning, the pre-reading, synopses, but there's a second thing that that you're also suggesting, which is it's a great way to build a bond with your toddler. It's an incredible way to always have very easily at hand something that you can do that calms them down, that focuses the attention, that creates ritual in your day. That's how you build your bond, with your baby and your toddler. It can be so hard when our days are so busy, where the toddlers can be, all over the place. And, the more you can create ritual, the happier your toddler is. And reading is just the best ritual. most of us gravitate to that bedtime reading ritual, right, for our babies and our toddlers. But you could also try during the day, have a reading, let's have a reading hour, maybe not an hour with a toddler, but reading time, story time, so all of that, just builds your bond, and they really do start to develop those associations of the love that you're showing them by reading to them, having someone who remembers your favorite book and brings it to you and sits down with you and focuses on you alone, when you're reading to that toddler. It's so important. And it's just something I promise, parents of toddlers, you'll remember that the rest of your life and the rest of their life, those moments you had when they were little, reading to them are just so incredible. The memories are going to be so sweet.
Absolutely. So true.
And then very, very true. And then going with how you're talking about reading aloud to your toddlers, but what about reading aloud to your older children? So
I'm so glad you asked that.
Throughout your book,
reading aloud when they learn how to read on their own. Reading aloud should be part of your family life as long as you can manage it, even into their teenage years.
Yes.
Because it's a way. First of all, it's a way to get it's nice for even the kids who are reading to get a break sometimes and have someone else be the reader. And it's also, if you've created that ritual, it really is a part of your relationship and your bond. And some people really experience when you stop reading to your child just because they've learned to read, you create a negative association. Like, I'm now reading on my own means now I don't get that time with dad or mom, and so they might even stop their progression into becoming independent readers, because it means that they're going to lose their story time, with the parent or the caregiver, so that's really something to think about, that being read to is such a pleasure and such an intimate thing that it's not just for babies and toddlers and preschoolers. It should really extend into the elementary school years, because it just helps you create that bond with your child. And, it's also, you want things that you can talk about with your kids, like sometimes it's hard to keep conversation going, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're reading books together, it's just an automatic thing that you know the characters in the books that they're reading. You can talk about them. It's, that's a bonus.
Yeah, how fun.
And Maria, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Maria, throughout your book, you were talking about also sitting together, maybe just in the same room and having reading time. So everyone in the family is reading together, but your own books. And you mentioned reading a couple of times throughout the book. So I know that's important to you.
Yeah, that's actually a really big one too. That if your goal is, remember, you're playing the long game here, right? You want to raise a reader. You want to raise someone who goes into adulthood having reading as an activity that's a part of their life that they can do, and that enriches their life, and develops the empathy and the sensitivity that we know readers have. That's also just proven through brain research. The reading develops empathy, develops the ability to see the point of view of other people, right? So we want that in the long term for our kids. So why wouldn't you model that? You have to let your children see you. Busy it's right. Our lives are so busy, so hard. When you're a parent, you're working, you have your home, you have so much. Some of us have elder care happening at the same time. There is so much on us. But can you find those moments to take a book, sit on your sofa or in your chair and read where your children can see you, so that they know that that's something that you value, and that's something that grown-ups do. They're not always just on their phone or on their computer. They also take a moment. They take a half an hour, say after dinner or before dinner or on a Saturday even. They lie on the couch with their book, with their thriller or their detective story or their gardening book, and they read, and so that is just something that we, when you just think about, there's a lot of the schools that assign reading logs, right, where you are reading assigned half an hour, and you have to. So imagine, what they're seeing if oh my God, I have to read for half an hour, but mom doesn't. Or mom said, you have to read for half an hour, and then scrolling on the phone, like it's just definitely. I'm not. We all. When we become parents, you lose so many parts of your life that you maybe had more time for before. But it's really important to not lose your love of reading. Like, go to the library, remind yourself what you used to love, when you had more time, and bring it home and read it in front of your kids and express enthusiasm. Like, that new, Sue Miller novel it was on hold and it just came up in the library. They just contacted me. We got to drive by so I can get it. If you have, when you have curbside pickup, or the ebook is now available nowadays, so much of what we do at the library is like ebooks, right? Because we can't get there, but I got the ebook finally, let them know what you're reading and that you're reading.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I wanted to ask you, well, actually, I just wanted to say first that I loved that you recommended replacing that term. It's sort of a negative term, right? Reluctant reader, with what you used instead, I believe, was visual reader. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more on what that means and how that fits in with the idea that all reading is good reading.
Right. I'm so glad you brought this up. So, a while ago, this term started circulating of the reluctant reader, mostly assigned to boys, and the idea was, they didn't just happily dive into these, boring, long novels, say, that the teachers were giving them, Well, so we need to understand how that happened. And, part of it is, first of all, it's just brain science, right? So boys learn to read on average a year later than girls, right? So during that time when teachers are expecting them to just jump right into the reading, a lot of them are still not there yet, right? So if you can give that boy who's 7 or 8, right? Because there is no correct age to learn to read, and many of our schools will start pushing formal reading instruction at age 5 and 6, kindergarten, first grade even. Not every child can do it. Their brain simply cannot do that yet, especially a lot of boys. But at 8, they can. One day it just snaps into place, and that's okay. There is no advantage to reading younger. That child who started at 8, at age 15 can be reading just as fluidly we all learn to read, as the child who started at 5. So it's really important to look at your 7-year-old boy and not say, oh, he just doesn't like to read. It's like, maybe he's just not there yet with working through all of those thick paragraphs. Can you give him graphic novels? The flourishing of graphic novels in the last decade is just one of the most amazing things that has happened in children's literature. They're winning prizes. New Kid by Jerry Craft, wonderful, amazing graphic novel, just won the Newbery, the big shiny sticker, best children's book of the year. That was a big breakthrough. And it's sending the message to parents and to a lot of educators. The librarians were there first. I'm giving you guys credit. The librarians have always known that graphic novels are books. Reading a graphic novel is reading, so just to bring in the brain science again, they can do this incredible research now on children's reading. They put a child in an MRI that's measuring brain waves. When a child is reading just a text-only book, only one side of the brain lights up. I can't remember if it's right or left. When a child is reading a graphic novel or a book where the illustrations are actually giving them information that they have to decode along with the words, both sides of the brain light up at the same time and interact. And that's a great thing. That's good, even better in some ways for their brain development. So if your child is reaching for graphic novels, preferring visual books to text-only books, that's okay. Support it. Praise them, for choosing a book, for being excited about their books, and be patient, because the mastering of just text-only reading will come in time, it makes me really upset to think about these entire cohorts of boys through the decades who have been labeled like, oh, they're not interested in books. Everyone's interested in books. It's just, it has to be the right book. They might not be interested in the book you think they should be interested in, but find what they want and what they like, and they're interested. The Guinness Book of World Records, that's a book. Show me a boy who doesn't want to read that.
That's popular. That's very popular in the library. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've never seen a child who doesn't want that book. Gross out statistic and fact books, that's a book. Some of them are really smart and actually kind of literary. There's books about roadkill. There's books about, the scariest insects. Those are books. And, let your child read those books, encourage it and support it. And also be reassured. That's reading. That's good. That's not something that you should, so if again, let's just really retire that term reluctant reader. And if you're that parent that you feel that in your boy, well, you need to spend some extra, and you don't need to teach your child to read. That's the teacher's job. You do have a job that's kind of hard, actually. Find the books that the kid likes, and that's, of course, where you guys, the librarians, come in. If you're having trouble on your own, finding a book that he'll like, I promise you, your friendly neighborhood librarians, that's their job. They'll tell you what he'll like, you describe your kid to them. They'll give you a nice list, so there's just so much encouraging stuff happening around kids' books and kids reading right now. I really hope we can move past those old stereotypes once and for all.
Yes.
And Maria, in your book, you have tons of lists of graphic novel recommendations.
Yeah, I love graphic novels. I mean, I just think, I do think it's one of the most exciting developments right now in children's books. Anything visual that, some of it is just, we can print, it's easier to print them. So you can look in our book for some nice graphic novel recommendations. You can, talk to your librarian, your bookseller, the independent bookstores right now could really use support, maybe every 5 you check out from the library, buy one, just to help support if you can. I was lucky enough to be on a panel once with Jerry Craft, the author and illustrator of New Kid. And one of the people in the audience, the question period came, and their question was to Jerry, I get it. I think your books are great. I know my kid loves graphic novels, but I spend, $10.95 to buy it, and he reads it in an hour. And I feel bad that I spent the money. And Jerry said the best thing. He said, tell him to go back and read it again, because I hide stuff. I hide stuff in the art.
Yes.
And you can't possibly get it all the first time through. So that's the other thing to remember, is that, decoding pictures in graphic novels is complicated, and there's lots of stuff in there, So I really encourage parents to just go to town with the graphic novels. And I mean, I'm at the point now where the minute someone, because parents ask me all the time, and it's a lot of times it's the most common thing is my 10-year-old son, for some reason. That's when it starts to all fall apart, or they all start, like they're done with Wimpy Kid, they're done with Dog Man, and like, now what, And I find myself always saying the same thing. And I'll just say that, there's a series called, so I start with Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, which is a fantastic series of graphic American history episodes, because the other thing that happens with a lot of the boys and some of the girls too, is that, they're not interested so much in always reading stories. They want facts. They want their reading to be telling them true stuff, So these stories are great because they read like adventure stories. It's like the Underground Railroad, World War I. There's one about the Donner Party. The Donner Dinner Party, that one. There's one about the Alamo. It's written by a guy named Nathan Hale, an amazing talent who does incredible research. I always recommend that first, and it's for the 10-year-old boy, and it's like magic. Almost not all of them, but a big chunk of them really like that book. The other thing I will recommend is a series from First Second publishers called Science Comics. And they have, if your child is more science oriented, oh my God, there's plagues, there's volcanoes, there's airplanes, there's robots, and it's in a comic form. So there's little narrative stories, lots of information, but all visual and really, really well illustrated. There is, if you're worried that your child is falling off the love of reading, bring in the graphic novels. That's always my first advice. And of course, my second piece of advice, because it's not, there's a lot to be said for just, I'm a lover of just a plain old novel too, So how do we find the ones that will really get your child who maybe is a little bit not as excited about reading as they once were? One trick that we find is really, really effective is a book that's just a little bit advanced in its subject matter, slightly taboo, so the line you can use is like, I'm not sure you're ready for this yet. But, so, and, it could be something like about, like one of my 10-year-old, when he was maybe starting at 8, he started to become really into these graphic novels. The Sunny Side Up, do you know those books by Jennifer and Matt? Brothers and sisters, based on their real life experience. Takes place in the 1970s when I grew up, so it's very funny the parenting or lack thereof, that goes on. But so Sunny, our protagonist, has to go down to live with her grandpa for a while in his retirement village, and it's like in Florida, and it's like, oh, what's going on? And in flashbacks, you learn it's because her teenage brother has a drug problem. And it's handled so beautifully and responsibly. But I think for a lot of kids, it's like, oh my God, this is advanced. Now I'm really, in the serious stuff, And so that's a really good strategy for kids who are getting bored with the sort of teacher approved or parent approved, nice stuff, something that really introduces them to a little bit of the tougher side of life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what? That's such a good, you have so many good recommendations. And some of them may or may not be good recommendations for another question I had for you, which was just sort of about conversations, books as conversation openers, right? During this time, there's so many things going on between the pandemic. Here in California, we're having wildfires in the South. These hurricanes keep happening. And also just a general social justice reawakening that's, kids are bound to have questions and have feelings around.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to have these conversations. And it's really hard, depending on we're all coming from different life situations, and we want our children to understand the full range, of what's going on in our society right now. And luckily, these authors and publishers who are putting stuff out for our kids, they think about this stuff a lot. I mean, there's one of the most incredible movements I've witnessed in my entire career is the We Need Diverse Books movement in children's books, which in 10 years has actually achieved change. 20 years ago, children's books were white, all white, and full of racist tropes and gender stereotypes, homophobia, just that was just par for the course, and this movement, these people who started an organization, We Need Diverse Books, lots of them, they're authors themselves, some are editors, Lamar Giles, Ellen O, these people got together and said, we demand change, and the publishers listen. And now when you walk into the library, the bookstore, every child is not white, and there are, especially when you go into the YA realm, the social justice books are incredible. I mean, and it's what teenagers want. These are the best sellers. Look at the bestseller list for YA. The Hate You Give, which was one of the earliest books to treat the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That book has been on the bestseller list for going on 4 years. And it's an amazing book. It is a wonderful story. It's a novel with a character we love, facing a struggle that, well beyond what she should have to deal with at her years, who does, watching her childhood friend be murdered by an officer, having to decide whether to speak up, to seek justice. Teenagers love this, and they're in really good hands, whether it's fiction, whether it's, Angie Thomas, Hate You Give, and On the Come Up, her next book is, and then there's a third one coming up that goes back into the story of Star's, her protagonist's father, which I'm dying to read, see, his life. He was a former gang member. How did he get sucked into that life? Yeah. So can't wait for that. Nick Stone, there's just so many great novels right now with social justice themes and plot lines. And there's also at the same time, the nonfiction that is speaking to kids in a way that is not preachy, that is just, speaks their language to them. I mean, our current poet, children's ambassador for children's literature is Jason Reynolds, who is just, if you've ever seen him speak, he's just electrifying. And if you read him, and on the page too, he's like so smooth and comfortable talking to teenagers about their lives and tough stuff. So he teamed, just as one example of a book like this that is also on the bestseller list now, he teamed up with Ibram Kendi, who had an adult bestseller, How to Be an Anti-Racist, to write a book for kids called Stamped, and it's basically an adaptation of that book. And that's not the only one. I'm just calling out the most popular ones. Yeah. There's so much going on right now in children's literature that is helping kids ask questions about what's going on in the world, helping them understand, their own role in creating change, the possibilities for them. So again, when people worry about kids and books and reading, I just have to say, it's, right now what's happening in kids' books is so exciting that the kids want to be part of it. I've watched, and I'm sure you guys have too, when one of these authors does an event at a bookstore or a library or, any event space, the line is around the block. They have they're rock stars, so parents of younger children and parents of teenagers, I just encourage them to learn about these books yourself, they might help you too to create that conversation with your kid. You can learn from Jason. He's found a way to talk about this racism. It's a difficult topic for a lot of us. Like, how do we even explain, where did this come from, why, and what should I do day by day, to combat it? Jason has thought this through too, and he can help you, to talk to your kid about it. So it's really, again, this goes back to our very first question, which is, we have so much anxiety around kids and reading, but also if you just open your eyes to what's happening in children's books and around children's books on social media, there's a community of YA authors that talk to each other and talk to their fans and kids in really supportive ways and interesting ways. We're living in a really good time for books.
Yeah, thank you. More excellent recommendations there. Thank you.
Maria, one of my favorite paragraphs in your whole book was not to criticize your children's book choices, because I've seen this. I've been present in these awkward moments where parents are telling their children, no, I don't want you reading that. And then the child ends up not wanting to check out anything from the library. And can you give some parents some advice about how families can work together?
Yeah.
And she just, I don't like to come up to parents and lecture them.
Right.
But it makes me so
this is a really hard
upset,
one. Yeah.
Because I see it a lot.
And this is really connected to this idea we have of like reading is supposed to somehow, parents have gotten the idea that reading is some way that their child is supposed to climb a ladder of achievement, And like, really, did you not read Archie comics when you were a kid? I did. Yeah. I mean, did you not read comic books? Like, did you not want to read your favorite, Babysitter's Club over and over and over, Mom? Like, of course she did. So why have so many of us tried to take that right away from our kids to just choose their own books, to sometimes read something that might seem easy, and you don't know what your child is getting out of that book. And this is another interesting thing from brain science, which is that rereading is actually really good for a child's brain development. And you have to remember, like, a child grows every day and develops every day. So the second time through that book, they're getting something entirely different, because their brain is in a different place. Their life is in a different place. So respect that, Also, if it is that book that they've read 10 times, then it's in the category of comfort book. This book is providing comfort. Really, do you want to take your child's comfort away? Especially comfort in the form of a book. Like, there's a lot of really worse comforts they could be going for right now, So so it's almost like we have to, just change our mindset around reading, and remember, the more you're trying to develop habits, so if they use the book that you don't approve of to help them develop the habit, then find a book that you think is better and add it to that book. You don't have to subtract the book they're enjoying. Just also check out, let him have his pile or her have her pile of the books that they like. And then, just if you want to just slip in your Katie Camillo, which I love, and say, just try this, and then you don't have it as a site of conflict between you. They might actually believe you that you are giving them a good recommendation.
Speaking of recommendations, another quote from your book, you say, if you want to raise a reader, be a reader. This sort of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, but I was wondering if you had any book recommendations for the adult readers that might be listening in on our program.
Oh, wow. Well, I can tell you what I'm reading. I mean, I will say honestly, I found it more difficult during the pandemic. I feel like my reading really has slacked off, and some of it I'm so tired at night. It was always my reading time was always at night, and because I'm having to do all these Zoom meetings all day, but sometimes I can't get through more than like 2 pages, and I'm like, ugh. So just be patient with yourself. The other thing to remember is, you like your kid, like we go through phases, and your kid might take a few months where they're not reading quite as much, and that might be true for you too. And be forgiving, because again, we don't want to create an atmosphere around books of like high stakes, criticism and whatever. So first of all, I give everyone permission to not read as much, sometimes. But if you are looking for a good book, so I am Gen X, but I am obsessed with the Sally Rooney novels, Normal People and Conversations with Friends. And one of the best experiences I've had recently was reading Normal People and then watching the BBC series, which is a really nice and faithful adaptation. And this is another thing I really recommend for families, is if you can do books and movies and compare, it's a great way to create conversation. So this might be a good way for if you're really into, love stories and just relationships. It's just so good. It's so it's just 2 Irish teenagers that meet in high school, and their relationship continues through college and possibly beyond. And I just love it. So I would recommend, like right now, if you're looking for something, to get really absorbed in Normal People and then the BBC series, but read the books first, I think, so you can have opinions, but that's not what Marianne should look like or whatever. So that, and I'm also reading the new Elena Ferrante called The Lying Life of Adults. So I try to stay up with my Italian, so I got it in Italian and in English, and I'm kind of reading side by side, which I think is a fun thing for me to do. And, I can quibble with the translator but also just, try to keep up my Italian, which is, okay, but I want it to be stronger always. So if you're bilingual or aspiring to be bilingual, that's a nice thing to do. Find a really good novel. Right now there's so much good literature and translation for in America, which is, again, kind of not always been the case, so, and then, I'm going to tell you honestly, the book I'm reading avidly every day is called The Art of Raising a Puppy, because we just got a puppy. So, use events in your life to bring books in, so I love this book. It's by the monks of Newskeet. It's this community of monks in upstate New York that raises German Shepherds, and they've developed a whole philosophy. So it's about raising a puppy, but it's also about life, the wisdom that they have to give about how to live a purposeful life and a calm life. So, this is another way that we have to really open our mind with reading, is like, that's a book, that counts as reading. And that, just like, it's I don't know. So I think a lot of people think like, oh, I haven't read anything. But then if they think about it, they did read that book about how to raise a puppy, and they did read that, whatever, that nonfiction account of, something, that they were really curious about, that those are books, so, or that, even like, I read a lot of gardening books, just, so, yeah, so right now I would say that those are my 3 top recommendations. That The Art of Raising a Puppy, even if your dog isn't a puppy anymore, you will learn so much about the human-dog relationship and just about creating a good dog. By the monks of Newskeet, Elena Ferrante, The Lying Life of Adults, and then Sally Rooney, Normal People.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing those. And thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering, Lauren, have you seen if anybody's asked any questions? I haven't seen any questions come up from the audience.
I have not. maybe we could just give one moment. Everyone that's tuning in, if you do have a question for Maria, you can place it in the chat right now before we say goodbye. Thank you.
Yes, let's give them a minute. And also, just to let you all know that you can check out How to Raise a Reader at the library, either as a physical book through our Library to Go system or as an ebook. So, yeah, so definitely check that out.
I'm trying to think of the questions I tend to get. You know, they tend to be the same question over and over. Here's one that I want to say.
Yeah.
Do we ever, is people say like,
no, you go first.
All right, let me just say very quickly. I just can't get my kid to read right now. They're doing school online. It's so much. What should I do? Audiobooks. Audiobooks are more important than ever. And again, this is a research-based tip because the research shows that listening to an audiobook is reading. The brain is doing the same functions. So this is especially important. Maybe if your kid is dyslexic or has some other challenge, audiobooks are the way for them to be reading the books at their, that their peers are reading that are appropriate for their, their developmental level, but that maybe their brains can't quite process the words yet. Keep audiobooks in your mix. It's really important. It can also be a really nice thing before bedtime for your older kids, the way to let them stay up a little bit later while you can listen to this audiobook. So that's another big tip. I want to make sure we got that tip in there. Be pro audiobook because it is reading.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great advice. We do have some questions in the chat. There's a question, bookstores are getting more and more absent in our neighborhoods. Oh, thank you. Is the neurobiology the same as reading on a tablet as versus reading on paper?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. Because I always try to emphasize this. Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, our brains don't process reading that's done on a screen. They don't absorb and retain information as well as we absorb and retain information that's read on paper. And this is interesting. I don't exactly understand why, but I think you all probably intuitively experience that too, right? When you read it on paper, you absorb it better. So it's true for adults, but it's even more true for children because their brains are still developing. So it's not like we're saying, don't let your children read on tablets. We all know it's inevitable. It can be really important, at various moments, especially as you say right now when we can't get to the bookstore. And if a kid is really into a series, you got to keep them coming. You've got to go with the tablets, right? But it is better for kids who have really established the habit of reading first on paper. Unfortunately, it's right now we can't control where our kids was at when the pandemic hit, right? So don't fret. The brain is very plastic. All of these things can happen later. But if you have a choice, get a paper, keep your kids' books in print as much as possible.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you for asking. Oh, I see another one coming in. Maria, you were always a reader, and what were your favorite books as a child?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I still have my childhood copy of my favorite picture book, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. I love that one. And then I also have a copy of my childhood, James and the Giant Peach. I love little doll books, Then as I got older, I loved the Ramona books, and then and beyond Ramona, I became a Beverly Cleary super fan. So if you go beyond Ramona, there's the Henry and Beezus books. She even has some YA. She has some books for teenagers, that I just really like, and I really liked them as a kid. And I recently went back and reread one of them called The Luckiest Girl, and I really, it's dated. Obviously, it's written, takes place in the 1960s, I think, but I still love Beverly Cleary. I think she's a national treasure, And then, I recently found a book that was republished that I had loved when I was about 12 called Nilda. Do you know this book? It was the first Latino novel for children that was prominent. Nicolasa Moore is the name of the reader, and it was recently republished by, I think it was by Cinco Puntos Press in Texas. And it takes place, and I loved it because, you know, my family was Italian American, and the protagonist Nilda was Latina, Puerto Rican, but she too grew up in a sort of ethnic New York City neighborhood, you know, and it just is the best thing I've ever read about that New York City childhood. It's just, there's certain things about it. It was just so sensitive. The family dynamics are great. I just love that book. So yeah, have you not read that?
No, and I want to now.
Recently it's had a little bit of a revival now, because people are realizing, like, hey, wow, there was this diverse book way back in the 1970s, you know, but and really good, like really literary. And so anyway, so that was something I was really pleased. It's really a great thing when, as an adult, you discover the books you read as a child, and you're like, I loved that, you know. So I get the chance, you know, because of my job, to have that happen a lot, you know. And then sometimes you go back, like I read all the Flowers in the Attic books, you know. That was my thing, like growing up in the 70s and 80s, right? Like these books were insane. They're like incest, like children locked in an attic by an evil grandmother trying to kill them, you know. And but I just couldn't get enough of them, you know. And I think this goes to what I was saying before about, like, kids like something that you get to a certain age and you want something that's a little taboo, you know.
Yeah,
that really helps. Yeah, I read all the Flowers in the Attic books. Oh, and then, you know, on that note, I will say there's another book I became obsessed with at about around this same age, 11 or 12, was the book called, it was the one about the plane crash in the Andes. What was that called? Like Survivor? Or something, you know, it was a real story about this plane that crashed in the Andes, and these people were left to survive for 2 weeks without any food, and they turned to cannibalism, you know, to survive. I think it's called Survive.
It's like an early version of that new series, I Survive.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why kids love this. They really love to read about people in extreme circumstances. And we didn't have I Survived when I was a kid. So this was an adult book, you know. You know, there are a lot of kids around. You should really, it's another thing we haven't really touched on, but you should be open to your teenagers and your tweens even, you know, reading adult books if they're curious and if they're reaching for them. You know, you know, Stephen King is great for teenagers, you know. Yeah, there's lots of others like I could think of, but that's just another thing that definitely was true in my life. By the time I was 11 or 12, I would always be looking up in my parents' shelves for possibilities.
Alive.
Alive, that was it.
Listeners, yeah. The detective work out there in the audience. Awesome. Oh, this has been so wonderful. Even reminded me of some books that I want to revisit. So.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And again, the thing we should say to parents: keep your kids' books, right? Yes. Because it will be so amazing to give them when the kids grow up and they maybe have kids of their own, or just strike out in adulthood, to give them copies of the picture books and the early readers and the chapter books that they loved as children. It's a real treasure. So keep copies of the books that you know. Obviously we want to patronize our libraries, but it's important too to create a little family library for your kid, books that they own, you know. And treasure them and pass them on.
So true.
Oh, great advice, Maria. You're just full of advice. It just keeps coming. I love it.
I know. Thank you. I can't help it. I've been, you know, it's been a year now with this book out there, so I've really learned so much just from parents all over the country, you know, and librarians all over the country, and booksellers. You know, the community of people around children's books is so strong. So I hope all of the listeners can really become a part of it. You know, it's people who want to help you find books for your kid and enjoy books with your kid and help your child to, you know, develop a really authentic relationship to reading.
Absolutely. Yes, that's what we're here for, right, Lauren?
Yes, this makes me so happy. And I just want to read this comment out loud. This was fun. So nice to hang with kids' book people. I agree, Wendy.
Always, kids people are the most fun people.
Well, we're happy to hang out with you all too. Thank you so much for joining us today, and plenty more programs to come here on with the Los Angeles Public Library accounts on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. So come join us again.
Definitely. Thank you, Maria. Remember how to raise a reader.
This was such an honor and a pleasure. My, LA is my second home since I lived there for 10 years. I miss it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right.